Hi, my name is Cole, and this week I made another level and 2 new enemy types. As usual, I wanted to get right into the level layout, leaving room for enemies and obstacles. This has been pretty straightforward so far, because I have most of the basic mechanics figured out, and I'm going off of blueprints for each level design. I created a new decoration, a little interior background for the boxy sections of the level, along with some 3D elements to enclose the space. The new mechanic I'm introducing this time is a laser. The first introduction to this element is, again, in a safe environment, and in fact the player can pass right by it unrestricted. The laser essentially casts a ray, and a particle effect is placed at the hit location. If this ray is intersected by a player or destructible object, a signal is sent, and that either kills the player or spawns a destroyed object in its place. Also created a timed laser, which has this sort of lighter beam that charges up and then turns on. With the laser working pretty well, I got to work on revamping my balloon enemy. Previously, I had these floating balloons that would sort of follow players around and shoot pellets at them. They were inspired by another enemy, which was just a turret. Now, the turret was honestly one of the most annoying enemies in my game. It was really difficult and hard to predict, and I sort of made it that way on purpose. It would actually account for the player's velocity and shoot pellets in front of them. It was a terrible enemy, and the balloons were worse for it. So, now that I had this laser working, I decided to put lasers on my balloons. I'm really happy thematically with how these look, and they're far easier to predict. They just sort of float there. They do follow the player still, just a tiny bit. But again, it's extremely easy to predict their movement. With this new enemy working, I implemented my previous falling and collapsing animations and added a particle effect to it. This is how it looks. As I said before, I wanted my lasers to not only kill the player, but also destroy other enemies and objects. So I got to work creating a destroyed buzzsaw and just implementing some code to make sure that T-bots and destructible crates could communicate with the lasers. This was really fun, and I'm really happy with how the lasers sort of blast through the entire level, just destroying everything in their path. So this is how that new interaction works with the buzzsaws. For the previous level, in order to score stars, the player had to collect them, and they were sort of scattered across the level. For level A4, the player instead has to die as few times as possible, and there's different star tiers for the amount of deaths that the player accrues. So in order to implement this, I got to work with some HUD UI and a challenge screen and some new sprites. The pause menu then reveals these tiers off to the side in that section that I left vacant, and here's how that all came together. Finally, for some finishing touches, I added backgrounds and some decorations to the blocks. There are 2 major puzzles in this level, both expanding upon the movable crate introduced in the previous one. In fact, there are technically 3. One which actually swaps out the puzzle in which the movable block is first introduced with a T-bot instead. And this teaches the player to use their environment in order to gain height or just traverse obstacles in general. Afterward, the player has to push a block into a pit in order to avoid rolling into spikes. And this is where I said in the last video that there was this tiny speedrunning tactic that I was planning on implementing. By exploiting Coyote Time, the player can make a low hop and just barely make it out of the pit before they fall in. It really isn't a super useful tool, but I just want to keep these things generally in mind moving forward. I just want to allow opportunities like this. After this is another puzzle involving blocking a laser beam with a movable crate. so that the player can traverse a large gap. And we reach the end of the level, which is my favorite part. This laser beam turns on and chases the player throughout, sort of destroying everything in its path, and just wreaking havoc. I wanted this final scene to be really high intensity, but also not way too difficult. So while the laser beam stays on screen constantly, it actually slows down as it nears the player. So let's have a look at that final scene unabridged. And that's it for this level. If you enjoyed this video and you want to support this project, please leave a like and subscribe. My Patreon is linked down below, and I'll see you all next week.